You're listening to the Catholic Wives with Toxic In-Laws podcast. Today's episode is part 2 of an interview I did with Adrian and Shaelyn Misiak, the husband and wife team behind Third Way Mentorship. Are you a Catholic wife grappling with challenging in-laws? The Catholic Wives with Toxic In-Laws podcast is your sanctuary for navigating the sometimes stormy seas of life with toxic in-laws while being validated for what you've experienced. Join me, your host, Miriam Susan, a Catholic wife who's weathered 3 decades of in-law drama, as we tackle the tough issues you're dealing with head on. Hi, Miriam Susan here. Welcome back to the Catholic Wives with Toxic In-Laws podcast. Today's episode, like I said in the intro, is part 2 of an interview that I did with the husband and wife team behind Third Way Mentorship, Adrian and Shaelyn Misiak. If you missed the first part of this interview, I highly recommend that you go back to whatever app you're using to listen to this interview and go back and listen to the first part first, because that definitely lays the groundwork to the conversation that you're going to hear, the continuation of today. I just really enjoyed talking with Adrian and Shaelyn. I love that they are a husband and wife couple and they can bring in each of their perspectives to a topic as difficult as having toxic family members. And they have their own experience with family members who are less than perfect, because, none of our in-laws are perfect, but they understand when that less than perfect starts to bleed into dysfunction. And so I'm just so grateful that they took time out of their busy schedule and away from their family to be with me and share their wisdom with you in these 2 episodes. So with that being said, let's jump right into the conversation with Adrian and Shaelyn Misiak. Now, when you're dealing with these intrusive and manipulative and sometimes toxic parents or in-laws, it's easy for our marriages to suffer. And, the wives, if it's her in-laws, we end up resentful. We feel isolated and alone in our own marriage. And the husband, at least my husband, always felt kind of caught in the middle between, us and his family of origin. What are some practical ways that a couple can protect and even strengthen their marriage, even while they're navigating this chaos and drama of their extended families?
Yeah, I think I kind of maybe kind of scattershot touched on it a little bit at the beginning, but particularly like, you know, you've got to address your relationships, and the more work you do, I think the more the order becomes more clear. But you got to work on yourself. I think also a lot of times for men, it's so straightforward. Again, not all men, but it's so straightforward. There's certain things you just always take care of, right? A lot of men, it's like I always take care of my body. I do my workout or whatever. Like, of course I would. Like, of course I read my Marcus Aurelius or whatever. Like, of course I do that. Um, then of course you work on yourself first, but you work on your spirituality. You work on recognizing your patterns and your defenses, and your groundedness in God and who you are. And then you go to the next level, right? Where do I stand with my wife? Um, as you work on those things, you realize, oh, yeah, okay, no wonder going for a run is so much more appealing. It's so much easier and familiar, right? But you do that. You work on yourself first, and you do the hardest. You do the hardest thing is, you give mercy to yourself first, and to the next level. Focus on, like I said, that groundedness, and God with your significant other or your spouse, and then extending it out. But that is always the first step.
Yeah, I think working on yourself comes with, the precursor of realizing, like coming to the realization and being okay with it. There's like, I cannot change my spouse. I cannot change my in-laws. I cannot change my family, whatever it might be. It's then like, okay, well, what can I do? Like what is in my control? What is my responsibility actually, which is stewarding the gift of your own life that God gave you. And like, trusting the process. I think it's so hard when we don't actually know the process. Like we don't know God's design, or we don't know, how this works. It's like hard to trust in something that we don't understand, but there is this process of, and it's like scripturally rooted, that like love others as you love yourself. Like it can only come from a true love of self. And so if we are able to turn away from like what we see as the problem and trying to fix that and turn toward what we can, it it is actually incredible. And I mean, we can only speak from our own experience, but it is incredible to see the transformation that just happens. Like it just happens without needing to like get your fingers in it and try and fix it yourself. But it's hard. It's hard. It's really easy to want to get your fingers in it and have some sense of control over it. But this other way, it really works. And I think for the women or men, that find themselves in this alone, they don't have their spouse's buy-in. It's really important to not do this work alone because it is hard. And so I think part of it is looking and identifying the places in your life where you can be fed. If that's in your marriage, like, praise God, I hope it comes to be that someday. But if it's not, like, do you have friends that you can go to that can actually like hold you and understand and just sit with you in the fact that it all sucks right now? Like, it's all really hard and there's so much that you want and that you long for that you're not seeing. You're not seeing the fruits of it in your life right now. And that's painful and that's real. And so none of us, like, what we're saying here is to say, like, forget about your pain, act like it doesn't exist. Like, no, it's very real. And I think part of it is like part of our, trying to control and fix something is to get away from that pain. But can you actually just turn toward it and recognize, like, of course this hurts. Of course I want my husband's heart. I want my spouse's heart. And it's being split in two, and that's painful. And receiving the care that you need in that, while also, I think, giving yourself, I think once you're able to do that and you give yourself the outlet of like, okay, can I be seen and understood and held in my pain? I think that gives us the capacity to then turn away from what, like the elephant in the room, the problem that wants to draw all of our attention toward it and wants to suck us in and wants to keep us like in this state of like everything is bad and until this gets fixed nothing can be good kind of mentality. Like, once we have somewhere where we can go and bare our heart and be held, we have this capacity to actually like turn away from that problem and see what's going right. Like what good is actually in your marriage, what good is in your family, what can we focus on and actually start like kindling the fire, and rather than like focusing on that over there. And that's not to say like it's like let's ignore it, let's not ever work on it, but can we find the capacity to not make it our primary focus of like what our marriage is or can be? I think that can look like finding hobbies, hobbies together as a couple or even individually, like give something to take your attention, something to, to kind of, I don't know, reorient your mind and to see goodness, truth, and beauty everywhere, that it exists in your life. Yeah. And I think like ultimately, again, just realizing as a couple and as a marriage that the problem of your in-laws it doesn't encompass all of your marriage. It doesn't need to. They've already taken so much from you. They've already taken so much of, your spouse from you. Like, if we cultivate the life with your spouse, the groundwork there, perhaps, that again, without like forcing and pulling them, like that can actually, they just see, the goodness, and they want that. They want something that they couldn't get. I think that takes a lot of intentional work, and it takes a lot of cultivating, again, your interior landscape, like, and recognizing that your worth and your value to, excuse me, your worth and your value is not, it's not based in even your marriage. It's not based in your relationship with your in-laws. It's based in God. And I think once we have that confidence, we actually, again, like cultivating that safety for us interiorly, cultivating that safety for our spouse relationally, we grow our capacity just kind of naturally to see so much more, to breathe life into these other areas, and to remove the pressure of fixing something that you just might not be able to fix, but cultivating a life that you can. And I think personally, like, this has been really hard for me. I think as you're gathering in this conversation, some of the enmeshed dynamics, reside more on my side of my side. And Adrian certainly has a different sort of dynamic with his mom that we've had to work through, but a lot of the actual enmeshment is my experience. And so it has been really, really hard for me to separate and say, like, actually, I'm worth doing something else. I'm worth, turning away from that, turning my focus actually back on me. What do I want? Rather than what does the group want, and what's going to make the group happy? Well, how can I make sure everybody else around me is happy so that I don't feel like I have to bear the weight of everything that everybody else is feeling? It's been really hard to shift and reorient, like, my thinking of, like, actually, I'm never going to achieve X, Y, and Z of making everybody else happy to the point of the stability that, like, then I can focus on myself. So I could just choose, to do it the other way around, to choose to focus on, like, what I need, and then allow that to, and not in a selfish way, but in a very, like, actually rightly ordered way of, like, my needs. If my needs are met, then I can meet the needs of other people actually in a more authentic way. Yeah.
So I think it's, ever since Shay and I met, I've always been impressed by how long she can stay sort of in an esoteric thought, describing a feeling, a situation, the approaches, and what was this kind of measure, like, how long can I last before I go, well, what's a tangible give me a tangible example. Like, what are you talking about exactly? Because I followed you for the first 5 minutes, but then, like, 10 minutes in, and then I ask people, and so many of the women are like, "Oh yeah, I know exactly what she's saying," and I'm like, "That's amazing. I can't do that. That's awesome." So it is me. But so I think sometimes we want on the male side, when that capacity of our dries up, we want something a little practical too. And it's definitely not, it's not step one, but I think if you're dealing with so many of these things and they're a thorn in your side. I remember reading a book a while back that really made it made an impression on me, where this woman was just talking about the importance of her relationship with her family, and this is more on the estrangement side. What she really just said was, like, if it's important to you, have you fasted? Like, have you tried that? And I was like, oh, I don't think I have. And it doesn't have to be anything huge at first, particularly it's like delaying a meal. Like, so many bros are intermittently fasting already. Why don't you actually do it for something even more worthwhile than, not just your health, but the health of your entire family and generations? Like, start small, but you can be heroic, and you don't have to make yourself miserable. In fact, you shouldn't. But do something tangible. Again, when my back's not thrown out, I do like to do a lot of things outdoors or running. I think it's kind of amazing. We have an amazing opportunity right now to just turn off our earbuds for 15 minutes I don't know how many supermen out there are able to do that sometimes right now. Like, it's so hard. Do that. Do that for your family. Do that as just a fast. Um, for the sake of the health of your family, for a better awareness, or, bang out your next 10 reps. Just, for a better reason. It makes a difference. It changes your disposition. And that being the case, right? Like, that opens you up to this sense of vulnerability and observing something different. And we have that really, it's in the air. It's probably always been in the air, this combative, this is what women do, this is what men do kind of approach. But I mean, to a lot of men, I'd say, dude, just look look at the way that they can lead. What can you get from that? Like, what can you take on? And I think Shay talked about this earlier. Such a key to so many of these things is just really have the strength and the courage to hear what is being said. What is being said from the feminine perspective? Not what you think it is, not how you change it, not whatever, but like be a dang hero and just listen with all the power in you to just hear it. That's the experience. You can do that. It's really hard, right? But that's I mean, I think over time you're gonna find, like, as a man, that your curiosity and your wonder and your appreciation of what your wife can do is going to challenge you to try that, to try it in a different way. And you will do some of those things that she does in a uniquely masculine way. And you'll be surprised, like, that this whole idea of, like, husband and wife becoming one, it's more than a line in the Bible. Like, you will find that, oh my gosh, like, maybe this is really what it's meant to be. Like, go figure, right? But it takes work. And so I would encourage, particularly like men, like, do the work.
I love what I'm getting from what you're saying is it's totally aligned with one of my core beliefs, I guess, through that I've come to realize through all this, and it was shared with us via a wonderful Catholic therapist, and he was like, there is a proper order to a Catholic family, and it's God first, your spouse second, your children third, and then everybody else comes after. And when we work on our relationship with God, obviously we're working on ourselves, and then everything else just falls into place. And it's easy to be in these relationships and think, well, I've got to, work on him. I've got to, do something to make him do what, and really it is all about working on ourselves and being the best version of who God created us to be in order to then be the best spouse that we can be, in order to be the best parent. And then in that way, then we do become the best daughter, the best son for our parents, even if it's not the version that they want.
That's right.
Yeah.
If we're in line with God, then we're the best child that they need.
Yeah.
The best, version of a child that they need.
Yeah. I love the way, sorry, I'll just jump
in. Yeah, no, go ahead.
I love the way that you said that too, of like God first. That kind of necessarily means ourself first, because we are image bearers of God, and our life is the life he gave us to steward, and the way that, like, our bodies, our minds, our spirits are the way that we connect with him. And so we cannot connect with him. We cannot have a true, like, deep, intimate relationship with him if we haven't got the clarity that we need from understanding ourselves, and clearing out the lies or the beliefs that maybe our families of origin, we learned from, or, that can happen in any sort of, experience of trauma or anything like that we can start believing things that are not true about ourselves or about God. And so, like, doing that interior work is working on our relationship with God. I think that's so often misunderstood too, but a really important point.
Yeah. So I think as we go through this process and as we, see our husbands hopefully realizing that, the dynamic with his parents or maybe the dynamic we have with our own parents is not healthy, have you noticed a timeline? Because we like things in a box. We like to check things off. Yeah, have you noticed a timeline? Like, what is some realistic progress in terms of, breaking these patterns of enmeshment? It sounds like y'all were a whole lot faster than we were. We're slow learners. And then how do you handle setbacks along the way? Because I think also we want things to be linear and we want them to go fast, like start off slow and then really go fast. And then everything's perfect, right? And then you don't have to worry about anything else. And, it's just not realistic. So, what would you tell, couples who are beginning this process? How is there a timeline? Like, is there it's probably going to take not 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think, first of all, definitely still in process over here in regard to our healing and our ability to this is a psychology term, but to differentiate, right, from our families of origin and become the very unique and unrepeatable creatures that God created us to be. And but I think the first thing that comes to mind, even as you ask that question, is just like how absolutely understandable it is, to want to find relief and to want to find it quickly. Like it's such a heavy cross to bear. I know, like, answering your last question, I was like, oh, like, as if it's so easy to turn away from the raging fire in your marriage and in your family that can be toxic in-laws. Like that's not easy. And it's hard. And I think when we look at it as a cross, I think even that sentiment like opens us up to see that, like, actually, like, the crosses that we were given, we were never meant to bear alone. We're not supposed to give it to somebody else to fix. Like, I think, like, putting that on your husband or your spouse, to say, like, well, fix it, like, fix this it's a very understandable temptation, but there is this cross for a reason, but you do not have to carry it alone. And so I think it can be easy to either want to, like, rid ourselves of our cross or to cling to it and to say, like, well, this is my work. This is, like, I have to fix this. I have to make this better. It's a very vulnerable and humble thing to say, like, I can't, and I don't know how, and I don't know what to do. And, like, can you just help me carry this for a while? Like, I'm drowning under the weight of this. And I think that so much, again, of the progress that we'll actually see in this work is dependent on our willingness to do the inner work that can actually bring us the freedom. Because ultimately, the person who we need to help carry our cross is Christ. He, like, we want to unite our suffering to him, and we can only do that if we do that inner work to get that clarity and to bring that unity back. And in the end of this work, like, that is the only thing we have control over. And it's going to be made, this whole process it's going to be long, and it might even be a lifelong journey. I hate to say that. I know, like, the heartbreak. But it's
find someone fun at least.
It's going to be made so much more manageable, more, like, digestible, I guess, and it's going to happen more quickly, if we start with ourselves. I think we prolong a lot of our pain when we're trying to fix and control what we just can't. But again, like, it's very understandable. And I think, like, if we're wanting to take those tangible steps of, like, how do we do this? The reality with enmeshment is that your spouse is really familiar to having a clinging, anxious other person in his life, likely. And so showing up with more of the same is actually just like, it's not necessarily harmful, but it's not going to move the needle either. And I say that with like so much compassion, because it's, again, like, how understandable this is. It's, you're suffering, and we all want, like, we're animals underneath it all, and we're designed to try and stay to avoid suffering, to survive. And so it's understandable to want to get rid of that and to feel anxious when you see it and when you feel it. And so what I'm asking, what I'm suggesting is really hard. It's not easy. But showing him again that something else is possible is actually what will soften and transform his heart the quickest. And I think in my experience too, like, the way that you can measure, like, okay, are we making any progress? Is anything changing? Is actually comes down to the freedom, the disposition of your own heart in front of the problematic relationship itself. Like, not just to accept it and allow it, like, that's not the freedom that I'm speaking of, but rather to be able to be freely, to gently and firmly assert, what you need to, in order to allow or not allow that in your life, given how harmful the actual behavior is. Because I think there are of course circumstances in which it is necessary to say, like, I am not allowing this in my life. This is not okay. Are there behaviors that you can you can stand freely in front of, knowing, like, this is not, their behavior toward me, their treatment of me is not reflective of my worth, my value, my dignity, who I am. And I can shut it, like, I can say, I'm not okay with that, and not be bothered by the pushback either. That is likely going to happen. But again, like, all of that being said, it's very understandable to have your own pain and your own anger and your own sadness. And again, so important to not carry that alone, because that's heavy. And while your spouse might not be able at this time to carry it, which is also, an additional pain and an additional, like, sadness, who in your life can help you carry that? Do you have a friend, a mentor, a spiritual director, therapist? And, like, again, even like the tangibles that Adrian was saying earlier, like praying and fasting, that the day will come when your spouse will be able to see, those scales will be removed, that light, he'll adjust to it, and he'll be able to carry this pain with you and this suffering with you. And yeah, I wish I had a more hopeful answer of, like, this is the timeline. But I think those are the ways that you can start seeing, you can start looking for progresses, even just like how for you feel in front of that.
I think it's reasonable it's important to have, like, a sense of things being incremental. So I think Bishay even said, this, you can have this moment where you can allow or not allow a certain conversation to happen, or a certain dynamic to play out. It's like, all right, maybe, but maybe you're 20%, maybe it's 20% not as bad. Maybe you still, like, melted down, but now instead of it, taking 3 weeks to recover, it takes 2 weeks to recover. That is tremendous progress. But the more patient you are with yourself, and the more kind you are to yourself, the more it will extend and radiate out to everyone else. Yeah, man, this isn't. It's in the same way that everyone, like, builds muscle or loses weight faster or slower or differently. It's the same in this. Only probably even less. There's, like, less biomarkers to take, right? So it's easy to get lost in the result without recognizing that there are small wins, right? We're all, you know, in danger of failing to see little things that can be indicators of progress. So I'm just thinking of, is your husband just slightly different? Even if that is just like you're observant, you might be able to see. Did the tightening in the face happen a little more slowly, right? Uh, okay. Listen, I hope he didn't steamroll you, but maybe before he did it take a little bit more, right? Before it just happened. And I hate to say like you can take comfort in that, but like you can't. Um, you know, have you noticed that maybe before like the family events or whatever, there's more of a hesitance? You can feel that sort of just intangible like, oh, like you can sort of feel like he's about to, something's trying to break through. Um, yes, I know that we can like have wishful thinking and try to, put, speak things into reality, but if you're working on this, chances are you're not making it up, right? Has your husband shared something new with you that you haven't heard before? There's so much that you can view differently when you look at things through a lens of hope, work in your own self versus, you know, being deluded, right? Um, so I think also like it takes some courage to actually have the hope that those things mean something. And I encourage people to look for those things. Chances are like the healing and the change will happen in a different way than you envision. If this is all like part of God's plan, that seems to kind of follow the pattern. It's never what you think, right? Um, but it is possible. And it is worth looking for those things. So I'm thinking about kind of a tangible example of how I experienced or we both experienced a whole lot of this. So um, it's not a story I particularly love, but there's been enough separation from it to where I can really see what was happening. So without getting too into the details, there was basically when we had just gotten married, there was a financial request made upon me, and it would have been quite an undertaking. Just kind of one of those things where you like, if you heard anyone else talking about it, you'd be like, well, no, don't put your name on like don't put your name on a loan or whatever. And then, like, are you crazy? Okay, well, maybe you're not crazy. Tell me more about the details. Oh yeah, you're crazy. Okay, don't do that, right? That's not worth the cost. And some dynamic of that had been playing out in my life for quite some time. Um, and there were a lot of people who would tell me I'm crazy, don't do that, I want the best for you. Then there were also people who were like, well, at least you have the capacity to help. Um, so I was getting all kinds of advice from different like sides. None of it, some of it good, some of it terrible, some of it, but also I just never recognizing the thing that I needed underneath all of it. So the way that I experienced it is as different in this moment where I was just kind of hit with all these things. Well, if you were a good son, you would do this. If you're a Christian, you would do this. I thought, you studied theology. You didn't learn how to, do that. Um, and for all my knowledge of like, well, no, that's not really what it is. Like, I know I shouldn't do this. It was like impossible for me to not do it. Um, I have to assume that people know what that is, that people know what that can feel like. Um, and so the thing that was completely new and different was that in my marriage with Shay, like she showed me something completely different, which was basically like her telling me like, hey, I know how you feel about this decision. And I think it's obvious what the correct or incorrect decision here is. But I want you to know that whichever way you decide, like, I'm not going anywhere. Um, and you know where we both stand, but I'm telling you, whatever decision you make, you will not hear a word about it from me. Like, I'll walk with you. I'll walk with you through this, regardless, whichever way you go. And my first thought was like, you're bluffing. That's not true. That's absolutely not true. So I'm just going to do what I'm going to do, and we'll call your bluff. Um, and then, like, this was a process of over a handful of days, but it ended up being true. Like, it ended up being that, like, no, if you're going to make a bad decision for the sake of our family, like, I'm going to let that happen. But I'm not going to punish you. I'm not going to yell at you. I'm not going to be passive aggressive towards you. I'm not going to do any of that. And um, it was just an experience that I had never, like, a safety that I had never experienced on my own. Um, expecting rejection, expecting punishment, expecting just that I just had no choice. Um, and the moment that I felt safe, I was like, okay, the decision is clear. I'm not doing it. And I never experienced that before. And that really was like the beginning of the turnaround in our marriage. I even really wonder if that watershed moment ends up being down the road, like the reason why we continue to be together, right? Because who knows what that wound and that rift can grow into. So I don't really know what the takeaway there is, other than courageously show up for your husband or your wife. Um, and I think about, like, how much courage it must have taken for Shay to do that, knowing how financially responsible she is, and probably, like, if we'd shared that with other people, she would have taken on a whole lot of of ridicule on my behalf. But she was willing to do that. That's something I never experienced before. And I just can say, if it worked for me, I know it will work for so many other people. So it's worth the work, regardless of the timeline.
We had a moment like that, not financial, but I was pregnant with our fourth, and it was the roughest pregnancy that I had had. So we had three little girls.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember their age. They were little. We had three, and they were little, and they needed their mommy, and I was not capable of adequately caring for them because I was just so sick. And so my husband reached out to both of our moms, asked them both to come, because we were in the military, so we were away from both families,
Okay.
and help out. And so my mom came for a week, and she cooked and she cleaned and she took the girls out, and basically had a blast while I was just being pregnant and sick.
Yeah.
And then the next week, my mother-in-law was supposed to come, and things changed on the drive. This is how I remember it. I don't know if this is exactly how it happened, because my daughter's 20, so who knows. But the way I remember it is that they were on the drive, which was like 8 hours to our house, letting us know that they would be picking up our children that I had never ever been separated from, except for like date nights, to go back to their state to stay with them for a week.
Oh.
And I would like to blame the pregnancy hormones, but this was just me. And I was so upset that I told my husband, I mean, everybody was already loaded in the car, bags, all the girls were all strapped in. My husband was behind the wheel. I said, I will lay down behind this car and you will have to run me over to take these girls to your parents. And I was dead serious, and he knew it. And everybody was crying. The girls were crying, and they're little. I think my oldest was 6 or 7.
Yeah.
So they're all crying. He's crying. I'm crying. Everybody gets out of the car, and at that point, it's over. And I get in the shower, and I felt like God was telling me, you need to submit. You need to let your husband take the girls to his parents. And I did.
Wow.
And that was one of those moments that he looks back and sees she was willing to do to follow my lead, even though he knew without a shadow of doubt that that was not my will. Like that was not anything that I was willfully doing.
Mm-hmm.
But then he also looks back and sees that as, wow, I was so wrong to put my mom's change of plans, shift it over the needs of my wife and my children.
Yeah.
And he's like, I would never do that again. I would never do that. And so I think so many of us have to have those moments. And it wasn't, I mean, that was not even 10 years into our marriage. And here we are 30 years later and still dealing. So like I said, we're slow learners. But I think so many of us have those moments where we show where our true loyalty is with our spouses, and it changes things. It doesn't change them instantly, but in a way that it does. Kind of like knowing that Shay had your back and she was not gonna hold it against you, and I didn't hold it against my husband that I can recall. Maybe he has different memories of that, but he might. But it was that moment when, that loyalty was tested and survived. And, in spite of the influence, the power that our extended family had over us in that moment, I think sometimes our marriages, when we have these difficult external, relationships, our marriages need these moments to prove to ourselves that we're in it for the long haul.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
And there is that safety, I think, for the spouse who's struggling with their parents, to know that, I've got your back. I'm not going anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And, I tell my husband, I was like, you haven't gotten rid of me so far. I'm not going anywhere, in spite of all the things that we've gone through. But yeah, I think there's that struggle of trying to keep everybody happy, and that then the reality of, you're married, and this is the relationship that you chose. This is your vocation now. And then wanting that switch to be flipped, like a literal switch, which is what I have wanted for a long time. I want it to just be off and then everything be okay. And it is so long, and it's so hard, and there are regressions and circling back and doubting, but like the little things, like, my husband doesn't wake up every morning and think about his parents the first thing. I mean, that's huge, but not super tangible for me.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So to pay attention. I love what you said, Adrian, about paying attention to those little teeny tiny things that are just those small, like teeny tiny baby steps forward of some kind of progress. And sometimes that's all we can cling to, is to know that okay, so my husband said he didn't want ham for Christmas, and they always have ham, things like that. Just it's hard to want that switch and know that, no, it's not going to be like, it's the little crumbs here and there, and then eventually maybe we get to that point where it's all no, I don't know. I don't know if we get to that point where it's all healed, but we can get to the point where we can move on, and we can be ourselves, and we can be as fully as we possibly can in this life, with our spouses, with our immediate families, and live out this vocation that God has called us to do. So thank you so much for being here and sharing your stories, because stories are just, they hit different. I mean, we can, talk facts or spit tea. I don't know what the word is now that my kids use all the time. Spitting facts, sharing the spilling tea. I don't even know. Whatever that is, we can do that all day long, and it's not going to resonate like a story from somebody who's been there, done that. So I'm just so grateful for your expertise and your time. And I would love for you to share how people can find you online and reach out and connect with you in any way. Please,
Yeah.
you've got the floor.
Yeah. Well, we have, we're on Instagram. Adrian and Shay is our handle. We have a website, adrianandshay.com. We have a podcast, Living the Third Way. This is a new venture for us, so we would love for you to give it a listen. Talk all things enmeshment and family dynamics and learning how to live the messy middle gray space of just being in process and trying to figure out what that looks like. And we do have we have a live educational webinar on December 16th. And so we would love to invite you to that to be a part. We will just be teaching about about this third way, about what we call the way of unmeshment.
I love that.
And so we would love to have you join us for that.
Is that it?
And I'll have links.
T-shirts. I feel like I hear that and I'm like, well, we do we do have all that. I think that's everything.
Well, I will share the links in the show notes for everybody to find you. And again, I'm just so grateful for our time together and for you being vulnerable and sharing, just the reality of how difficult this is, and that there's not any magical pixie dust that we can sprinkle over our lives and everything will just be, unicorns and rainbows, but that it is, it's hard, but it is very much worth it. And that you can get through these really hard times and still laugh and still smile and still get along and live out this vocation that God has called us to do. So thank you for your work. Thank you for your time, and pray that everybody can find you and reach out and get the help that they need. So thank you.
Thanks, Miriam.
Yes. Thanks for having us.
Okay,
Thanks so much for tuning into this episode today. I hope you got so much out of it and feel encouraged, but maybe you're still feeling a little bit isolated and alone. And if that's the case, I'd like to invite you to join me in the Catholic Wives Plus Toxic In-Laws community. This is a safe space for you to feel validated, to feel seen, to feel heard, to participate in things like the St. Andrew's Christmas Novena that we're going through right now. And it's just a place for fellow Catholic wives to connect with other women who really understand exactly what you're going through. So consider this your official invitation to join us simply by going to toxicinlaws.com and signing up for the community. The community aspect is completely free, but there is a paid option to upgrade if you'd like further training on our monthly themes. So far, we've covered boundaries, we've covered legal protection, we've covered handling the holidays, and we have a new theme every month that is specifically designed to not only help you with these difficult relationships, but to draw you closer to the Lord. So please join us. Go to toxicinlaws.com, sign up for the community, and I'll see you on the inside. Disclaimer. All content and information on this podcast and our website, including our programs, products, and/or services, is for information and educational purposes only and does not constitute professional medical, psychiatric, or mental health advice of any kind, and does not establish any kind of professional client relationship by your listening to this podcast or use of my website. A professional client relationship with you is only formed after we have expressly entered into a written agreement with you that you have signed, including our fee structure and other terms to work with you in a specific matter. Although we strive to provide accurate general information, the information presented here is not a substitute for any kind of professional advice, and you should not rely solely on this information. Always consult a professional in the area for your particular needs and circumstances prior to making any professional, medical, or mental health related decisions.